Hi, my name's Neil Crump, Chief Data Officer for Worcestershire Office of Data Analytics. We're doing a project on behalf of the Ministry of Housing, Communities, Local Government, and it's around registrations data. So the Digital Economy Act has given us new powers, new legislation, and we can use birth, deaths and marriage data in different ways. So we've been interacting with lots of frontline workers to get their ideas about how that registrations data can be used in practice. So today we've got a workshop, we've got a great team, the WODA, Worcestershire Office Data Analytics team, we've got the digital team from County, the user research team, and we're joined by social finance. And we're looking today at, prioritising all of those great ideas and then working out how we can actually get a discovery project, a business case sorted and shared with the rest of England and get your feedback.
So up to the point of our workshop, we've been undertaking initial user research with a wide range of teams and service areas across local government and health services. The aim was to get a long list of possible uses of registration services data which records a change of circumstance due to a birth, death or marriage. The series of slides which will be shown next detail our user research findings so far and our methodology. From the initial user research, we identify key 6 areas which the majority of key user cases fit into. These are children's services, revenue and benefits, adult social care, public health, housing and health. 5 separate use cases were identified for children's services. This included being able to use registration services data to improve our understanding of family context when a safeguarding concern had been raised. 3 use cases were identified for revenue and benefits. This included improving our ability to detect fraud. 7 use cases were identified across adult social care and safeguarding. These range from how we manage residential care home spaces to monitoring for unusual patterns of deaths in an area. 2 use cases were identified for public health. An example is using the data at an aggregate level to identify and monitor trends in public health. 4 use cases were identified around housing. These might be particularly relevant to local authorities which hold their own housing stock, but this is something we would like to test. 4 use cases were identified for health. This included cancelling appointments which were no longer required for people who had died. Throughout the initial user research, we have identified a number of barriers and issues with the current way of working. Some of these barriers would be improved if registration service data was shared. Some barriers would still remain, even using registration service data, unless another part of the process was also changed. This included where not all data or fields are passed on, irregularity and integration with current systems, and onerous processes. We identified 4 criteria which we thought were most important to try and prioritise for which our long list of user needs we were going to take forward to the next stage. These were whether the use case would deliver short-term savings, the ease of which we could justify the information governance for the use case, how applicable the use case would be in other areas, and the social impact of the use case for residents.
So we started today with 25 user needs spread across 6 different services which were identified in the first stage of our user research. Over the course of a long and interesting morning, we managed to whittle those down to just 4 specific user needs. And then we spent a lot of time thinking how are we going to ask the right questions to dig into these further, how are we going to map service pathways, how are we going to get the right feedback that we need from our interviewees so they can build a business case, those sorts of things. But one little exercise we did at the end of that session is brainstorm all the big underlying assumptions that are sitting behind these things that we haven't perhaps considered yet. What are sort of all the big hurdles that we'll need to get over if we were to build a solution around this use case here, number 4? What do we have to what do we have to prove for it to be valuable? So for instance, on the one that I was looking at over there, which is around providing registrations data on births to children's services so that those children's services can then proactively get in touch with families about universal services offers in the area, nurseries, that sort of thing. Big question is there appetite amongst those services, and is there actually time and resource to put towards designing a whole new process, designing a whole new leaflet, designing a whole new pathway to get leaflets to people, even if they were to have the data. So it's those sort of big underlying assumptions that we need to sort of get over to prove that these things are successful.
Following our prioritisation exercise, we were left with 4 use cases which we wanted to take forward and explore in more detail. The first use case to investigate further was the use of birth data to proactively give information about services for families to new parents. This is an early intervention use case to ensure that all parents have access to information about services that might help them. The process is not currently taking place in Worcestershire. The second prioritised use case was to allow Revenue and Benefits to make the correct charges to residents for council tax. Information currently received by the service does not contain all the data that they need to act on. This information might also help with the detection of fraud. The third use case we are taking forward is around cancelling care packages and payments after a death before overpayments are made in adult social care. This could save time and effort in recovering overpayments, but would also benefit residents where they were making a contribution to care. The final use case we want to investigate further is around how death data might help to better manage housing stock. Again, in this case, the service does not receive all the data required when they are notified of a death currently, and the service can spend a long time tracking down the next of kin. This means that the property might sit empty for longer than necessary, rather than going back into use for a family in need. So the next steps for our discovery are to undertake a second round of interviews and speak with newly identified stakeholders. We're currently working with some other partner and local authorities, but would really value the opportunity to test our findings and understand other potential uses on a wider scale in England. So if you'd like to collaborate and share your views for your service and council area, please do get in touch.